This is Brass Tactics, policy and strategy for the people, not the politics.
Welcome to Brass Tactics. Pete, Joe, and Matt coming at you with a double recording feature because why, Pete?
I neglected to upload my audio file from the last episode and it got deleted, so we had to scupper the whole episode.
Everybody knows, don't trust the autosave. Never trust the autosave.
Don't trust Pete and his longboat.
A shame, too, because that especially had some very nice zingers that I don't know if we'll ever be able to recapture that lightning in a bottle like we did that magical Tuesday night so long ago.
Well, so I know I tried to talk about improvisation and innovation, but I was approaching it from the topic of balloons, and I understood that that was coming back in vogue because one of you or both of you were talking about a Japanese invention that has been resuscitated by the Ukrainians as of late.
And we could also bring up the Palestinians and Hamas with the fire balloons that went into Israel, which we didn't talk about last.
Is that who I'm thinking of? For some reason, I thought y'all were talking. It said the Ukrainians were doing it.
We were talking about the Ukrainians, but last time I didn't mention the fact that Palestinians, before this whole October 7th thing kicked off, were attempting to set wildfires in Israel or burn down crops by sending incendiary balloons into Israel.
Yeah.
So same idea, low cost, fire and forget system, which you can improvise and as an insurgency, or if you're Ukraine, if you're fighting someone asymmetrically against a bigger power, you need every advantage you can get to cause problems. I mean, Pete brought up the Brits repurposing the barrage balloon and just causing havoc on power lines and transformers.
No, that was me.
Oh, that was you.
That was me because I wrote a whole article on this stuff, and Pete didn't even bother.
Because I was the one who told the story about the J-lens observation balloon that broke its wings and then dragged its tether across Amish country for about 800 miles.
Breaking out of this meta-narrative role and taking it back. So today we were going to talk a little bit about innovation, and a lot of that was disruptive innovation and really just baseline cheating in warfare. The cocktail combo we're going to be talking about is asymmetric warfare, and because we're all hot-headed today, it will be about balloons. So, asymmetric warfare, to recap the argument that nobody else got to hear because, again, courtesy of Pete's itchy trigger finger, Xing out early. Asymmetric warfare, also known by me, at least, as just the general state of warfare, is one side has overwhelming advantages and everybody just assumes that they're going to win, and the other side is under-resourced by comparison. This might be fewer people, this might be less training, this might be poorer technology, but whatever their disadvantages or multiple disadvantages are, it's just they cannot meet the other guys on a battlefield and fight a pitched battle a la World War I and World War II, the American Civil War, and any other battlefield movie that anybody can recall. And rather, asymmetric warfare looks a lot more like guerrilla warfare is the standard. People hiding in the woods, taking pot shots where they can, improvising booby traps and other explosives, and they're doing this because they have to level the playing field somehow, and that is by de facto cheating. Now, how do you deal with insurgents, who are usually the other folks in the asymmetric warfare? Well, the oldest strategy is attributed to Genghis Khan. That's just kill everybody.
Well, to be fair, the Romans were doing it with great effect about a millennia before Genghis rode out of the steppes. And before them, the Assyrians were doing it.
Oh, but I mean, they also just less than politely removed these folks as well.
Yes, and sold the inhabitants into slavery, not just pushing them elsewhere. Offered them gainful employment.
Or salted the earth in Carthage.
So, for lack of a more concise term, let's call option one for asymmetric warfare is finding a permanent solution. And so then what does that leave for option number two? And where do balloons tie into this? Where do we tether balloons into this conversation? See what I did there?
Tether? brilliant.
Tethered us to that idea there, Joe. I think it really comes down to finding a workaround to defeat your enemy's mechanism, shifting topics slightly, but you could almost look at Ukraine right now with the turtle tanks that the Russians are doing is as an improvisation against the Ukrainians' improvisation. We have FPV drones that can crash into your tank and defeat the top of your tank because there's not enough armor there. Well, great. We're going to build a gigantic shed around our tank and we're going to drive it into combat.
Mm-hmm.
I think two episodes ago you actually called that a devolution.
The evolution.
Yeah. We've rediscovered assault guns.
Yeah,
from
we
the 1940s.
rediscovered the Ferdinand armored assault gun, which had more frontal armor than British battlecruisers did at Jutland, which is exactly the type of thing you need.
Seriously?
8 inches, yes. Effectively, the Russians have remade assault guns because the whole point of a tank is generally seen as having a turret that revolves 360 degrees, and these things have a traverse of 10, 15 degrees each direction, maybe. It's effectively assault gun. But yes, it's a devolution, but it's also a response to an asymmetric threat that they haven't found another way to combat.
Well, arguably, then, the trench warfare we're seeing in the Donbass is another devolution of warfare, away from maneuver and back to static attrition.
I compare it to the way that your body reacts when you have an injury. Typically, you get a muscle knot or you get a really part you can't move around and you got to go to the chiropractor, go on muscle relaxers. Your body's doing that to protect itself. It knows something's hurt and it's trying to prevent it from moving. The Russian and the Ukrainian armies know that they're hurt and their only mechanism to protect themselves is to dig holes in the ground right now. And until we see the next adaptation in balloons, probably ain't going to be it, although it'd be great to see a balloon assault group go into action. Until we see whatever that next thing that really puts one side over the edge. At the end of World War I, it was the stormtrooper tactics, which I would argue the Russians are trying to recreate using motorcycles and Desert Cross 1000s right now, albeit unsuccessfully. But the idea is there. If we can close across this gap quickly enough and latch on, grab the enemy by the belt buckle where their artillery is ineffective, then maybe we can pour more troops in and make a breakthrough.
Yeah, but again, unlike in World War I, the no man's land is kilometers wide now instead of just maybe 50 or 80 yards.
This is how you use balloon. I'm borrowing from Pete's colleague Chris for this one, who I was having a casual conversation one time, and he's like, wouldn't it be awesome if we just had just big old net guns that we could just shoot at drones and capture drones that way? And I was like, I feel like they move really fast for that, but I'm not an air defense guy and you are, so hey, maybe. But you know what you could do with a balloon or several balloons?
You're not saying tie a net in between them like a giant ping pong court.
Cheese wire gill nets.
Bring back the barrage balloon.
Nice barrage balloon drones through it.
Physical airspace denial. So it's basically an adaptation of that.
All you need to do is then shoot down the barrage balloon.
Yeah, I think the barrage balloon under the sun is kind of
fly above the barrage balloon.
But you have
yeah.
So the balloon, no, balloons. However cheap these drones are, balloons are infinitely cheaper, and that's very easy to create a redundancy. Plus, these balloons can fly at a higher altitude than any drone can sustain themselves. At least
still need to fill it with lighter than air helium, which is a huge pain to get to the front.
Or hydrogen. Bye.
That's great to have a flaming ball of silk descending on your fighting position.
He over here with his silk pantyhose balloon.
Or paper or plastic.
All right.
Whatever you want to make your flammable death ball. Hey, I'm going back to World War I, man. I'm thinking of silk. Oh, the humanity.
Well, couldn't the Chinese... Supposedly the Chinese, going to balloons, the spy balloons that went across the United States, which was a huge deal, and then everyone just mysteriously stopped talking about it. The fact that we shot one down over Lake Michigan and one over Alaska and never even saw what those ones looked like.
Don't forget the one east coast of South Carolina. That flew across the whole contiguous U.S.
Well, that one we at least saw pictures of. The other ones that went down.
I started thinking we were going so trigger happy with it. So somebody on a honeymoon or on the wrong proposal video gonna be out there.
It was shot down a hot air balloon. Like Albuquerque or the balloon festival, it's just a wholesale city everywhere. balloon blowers from an F-22.
It's a balloon swarm. Stand down, Fox 5, fifth and out.
Ah,
I mean, I guarantee
That's what I
there
was
were a few innocent weather balloons that probably got caught up in that.
I've heard the one over Alaska might have been that. There was supposedly a high school radio enthusiast group that lost their
The
balloon.
second that F-22 jockey got a kill mark on his cockpit, every single fighter pilot in Northcom was itching to try to get one.
Yeah, and you know those other ones that they never showed us any footage of or pictures. So yeah, those might have been the Chinese one off South Carolina. Absolutely threat. The other ones, yeah, we don't know what those were.
that one of them was just a straight up albatross, just wrong place, wrong time.
One of them might have been what are those like kids party tent things?
Or if you're in Oklahoma, a trampoline. Those things go flying when the windy season starts.
Yeah. So scaling this back even far, balloons actually have a really long history in warfare, but balloons as an offensive weapon kind of fall into like an improvised explosive device category more often than not. At least as Hamas used them. That's how they've been used before. And this idea of using a different domain, so just trying to find a way to cheat, not just on land, goes back a really long time. Sir Francis Drake popularized the fire ship, where he just literally lit boats on fire, sailed them at enemy ships parked in harbors, docked in harbors. Hey, Pete, the wind's almost calm enough that they might actually pull your pier out now and actually use it for...
We'll say the Mediterranean is infamous this time of year for bad weather. As I actually started looking into, you guys did not tell me that the joint logistics over the shore J-lots can only work when wave states are under 3 feet. That's...
Yeah, you saw what happened to the Mulberry harbors in World War II. Not much change.
Oh my goodness, man.
Pete, I told you that this thing is basically the same vibe as what Tom Hanks left his
A
island.
bunch of floating milk cartons.
It's just a big old raft, yeah.
It's the same raft that we go across rivers on, take pontoon bridges out of
That
it.
somebody, can you imagine being the tank driver on that pier at that 3-foot wave mark? Like, no,
Not like
I'm not even in the name.
Yeah. Ah! No guardrails. You're
Nothing more terrifying is the equivalent
One
tanker
part
in
of
the
the
Cold
dock.
War that they used a snorkel device on their T-72s. You just have to trust that the thing works.
Find
That real quick.
What a difference across the bottom.
you, dude. And you, yeah, and the hatches on that thing open
Russia's
out.
not gonna
So
let you.
Pressure.
the escape hatch on a
Push
T-72
down
when you're
on
10
me.
feet below the water. No.
Down on you too, comrade.
Oh, man. There were exceptional losses. We've made brilliant progress. Come on. The results of the tank drops were classified. We regret
Yeah,
to tell you.
not a good time. Any amphibious capability built into an armored vehicle, unless it's something made by the Marines, I don't ever want to be on it. Even then, they had one of their AAVP-7s go down on the coast of California like 2 years ago and drown 14 people. So armored vehicles aren't meant to float. Although in World War II, the Japanese had an armored amphibious tank that mounted torpedoes.
No way. That's
Yes.
awesome.
Mm.
That's awesome. That's so stupid. It's cool.
Or something.
They also,
Hang on. I was about to segue to that.
okay.
The tank with torpedoes?
No. I was going to segue to Japan's other secret weapon. Their other secret weapon besides the torpedo tank. What was it coded as, Matt?
To be fair, it wasn't supposed to be a secret weapon, right?
I mean, it was. It was highly classified by the Japanese.
It was highly classified by the United States government, though.
Well,
Unless we are not talking about the same thing.
no. We're talking about the same thing. I agree with you. So during World War II, and before actually, it was designed in the 1930s, the Japanese had a project called Fugo, meaning code weapon, Fu, meaning weapon, which consisted of hydrogen-fueled paper balloons carrying about 55 pounds of explosive, mostly incendiary, but they had a high explosive bomb to set everything off in there too. that they would set up and then let drift across the Pacific Ocean
Dun, 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 dun.
in the jet stream to attempt to land in the United States and cause forest fires and mass panic, hence the mix of incendiaries and explosives.
Emperor crops as well. They were just hoping they got lucky at where they landed.
Opportunity pyromaniacs.
Yeah,
So-
unlike the Chinese spy balloon, these things had very limited radar capabilities or GP global positioning capabilities. So they're just floated them across the Trans-Pacific air current and just prayed.
So this weapon is actually notable in history for being the first ever intercontinental weapon system, preceding the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile by almost 2 decades.
ICBMs.
The ICBB, the Intercontinental Bomb Balloon. And they made over 9,000 of these things. There were, I believe, 300 fires, according to unclassified U.S. reports after the war. There were 300 fires caused. None major because of as anyone from the Pacific Northwest will tell you, it's very wet there. So it's not ideal for setting fires.
So it was wrong time of year, but nobody heard about it either, which is interesting because one of the things asymmetric warfare is going for is you're not only just cheating materialistically, but you're trying to just go for like a terror tactic, some shock and awe to sort of jolt your enemy's civilian populace out of bloodlust, out of an interest in war. And so just lighting fire to large swaths of the West Coast, they were hoping would really help the Americans shake their resolve. But nothing showed up in the news.
The Japanese were also launching these toward the very end of the war. They started, I think, launched them in the fall of 1944.
Yeah, no, they were like, oh crap, well, we're pretty much out of munitions and we are running out of pilots very quickly because of another asymmetric tactic of just flying the planes into large enemy ships.
Well, I think the kamikaze was because they were running out of pilots.
And
It
these
wasn't the
fire
reason
balloons-
they were running out of
And the
pilots.
fire balloons are just so much cheaper compared to all of these alternatives.
With a little bit of modern tech and some tweaking, they could have been absolutely devastating asymmetric weapons. I agree with you. They were not just silly. And the US government was very afraid of them. That's why they censored it so much.
And despite these hydrogen fire bombs being launched, the only people who gaslit in this was actually the United States, because our intelligence, you like what I did there? Anyway, what our intelligence assets would decide when they went all around to these municipal governments and presses were like, hey, we know this is happening, but let's just not talk about it. And the Japanese are going to lose their minds because they're like, where are all our balloons going? They clearly haven't made it to America. And so the media worked with the United States to cover up the fact that fire balloons, while they weren't having much effect, were still in fact landing all across the West Coast.
And they make really, really bad logs to put on your fires, too, if you ever find one.
Yes, ironically, I believe the only fatalities was a group of civilians who either kicked it or put it in a fire.
It was like 20 years after the war or something.
No, it was it was in May of 45, actually. Ironically,
one group of people during the war and one after.
Yeah. So ironically, the people during the war, his name was Mitchell, and him and his church group or whatever, they kicked the bomb, and it killed all 6 of them. And so now there's a Mitchell monument in Bly, Oregon, commemorating their very, very bad choice.
And then there's the other people that Joe brought up last time that decided, that oddly shaped object over there, let's toss that on the fire and see what happens. Kaboom.
Very wholesomely, the Japanese government had a bunch of cherry trees planted at that monument in like the 1960s as a peace gesture, which is very, very nice of them in the spirit of reconciliation.
Yeah, they must have felt really bad after that firebomb went off. Because the U.S. didn't do anything with fire to Japan.
No, we didn't do anything.
Or anything
Speaking of asymmetric,
fire.
Something asymmetrically disproportionate to the one barrage balloon that went off.
I mean, yeah,
I'll drop so many bombs that you boil a river in the city and the people in it. It's not burning; it's boiling.
Okay, so clearly we need to dissect. We need to do an East versus West bombing campaign because, like, that is a fascinating piece of, was this strategy racist?
I mean, Dresden and the bombings of Hamburg are actually on par, if not worse, than any of the bombings on Tokyo or Osaka.
On paper, those were nominally targeting strategic facilities.
Yeah, but so were the ones against Tokyo and Osaka, especially.
No,
It's always
no,
the railhead.
that's the fun
three.
part. Is what's his name? Hap Arnold's on record saying, "Yeah, there's no way that blanket bombing in Europe would achieve any sort of strategic effect that was significant. So you should be targeted strategic strikes deep in behind enemy lines." And then he switched theaters after Germany surrenders, and he's just like light it all on fire. Just turn
That's
it all to
fascinating.
glass.
Well, yeah, but it's all, yeah, that is LeMay, and it's also the fact that LeMay now has 2 theaters worth of air assets, and Japan is utterly paralyzed. Like there was no air defense or air force or anything by
Let's put it this way.
summer of 45. They were prostrate beneath the
The
U.S.
Americans lose as many B-17s in 2 raids on Regensburg in 1943 as we lose B-29s over Japan during the entire war.
Yes,
We lose
Sure.
something like 120 B-29s over Japan during the entire war.
and even Dresden has launched. What is it, March or February of 45?
March of 45.
March of 45. The war is essentially over. The Luftwaffe is gone. That's when they start really terror bombing Hamburg and Dresden. They can start terror bombing Japan by like 43 and 44. As soon as we take Iwo Jima, especially.
Well, Iwo Jima is later on. Initially, the first raids against Japan are flown from China,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not successful because we
Yeah.
try to do European-style bombing, and high-altitude precision bombing doesn't work against Japan. And then eventually we get bomber bases, Tinian, Guam, Saipan. Yeah,
There were
Guam.
5 B-29 bases on that tiny little 17-kilometer Long Island.
And proto napalm.
And proto-napalm. Yes. Oh, but don't forget about this.
And we get to the point where the B-29 has 4 gun turrets plus a tail turret, and we take all 4 of the other turrets off besides the tail
Everything
turret.
must go.
Everything.
We need
put
more
bombs
fire.
on.
Put more incendiaries in it, fly it lower, and drop more bombs.
But that.
But
also
wait, it
makes
gets
my-
better.
Well, what
These
about
bombs aren't accurate enough. We need to put homing pigeons
no?
into the noses in order for them to be more precisionly guided.
It's
But
also-
wait, you know what? These time delay fuses just don't delay enough time. We should strap napalm to bats.
Yes.
Bats roost all over the very, very much wood-constructed city. And then let it float
if we
and
did
then
it.
explode up the bats.
That unironically would have worked if we
There
had
was
tried
a
it.
point where they got loose at their training facility. and
also-
burned a bunch of buildings down.
Unapologetically messed up.
I mean, it's no less
It's
messed up than
asymmetric, though.
it is. It's no less messed up than the Soviets training dogs with anti-tank
Nobody
mines strapped to their backs.
than the bats.
Well, I mean, was it Freud or Nietzsche said people cheer when you kill a cockroach and boo when you crush a butterfly? You're just subjective. Do we really care that much about the bats?
My goodness. The Fliegermaus in German, flying mice.
You gotta love German words.
Yeah, it's really good.
Just Schmetterling.
These tactics are still alive and well today, as you started off talking about Hamas Israel.
What about the parasailing, the Hamas parasails, which were infamous during the October 7th attack, is a brilliant example of it. Who would have thought they would have weaponized parasailing?
I mean, we did.
Which, the balloon, going back to
101st Screaming Eagles.
Okay,
It's
The
not
gliders.
glider.
gliders. What were those gliders that we used in World War II called, Matt?
Parasails.
Wake, yeah, that was it. Yeah, those are not parasailers. You could put like 30 guys in a glider. They're in a ball
The Brits put tanks and gliders.
Yeah, the
A more highly concentrated target.
light tank Tetrarch, by the way, because the Brits aren't afraid of their nomenclature.
No, it's a
Yeah,
it's a airborne recon assault vehicle or whatever Matt said at the top of the hour.
My favorite thing about the Sheridan was how it was supposed to fire a missile out of the gun as well as a shell.
The Shillelagh missile, yes.
Yeah.
It's a gun launcher.
It's a
So,
fantastic
The
idea.
problem was that if you fired the gun, it was a 6-inch gun, 152 millimeters, it would knock out all the electronics for the missile. And if you fired the missile, it would leave residue and debris in the gun that would make the breech blow up if you fired the cannon.
So it's one or the other, huh?
One or the other. Not to mention the rate of fire was agonizingly slow, about 1 to 2 rounds per minute.
That is still such a great idea. What a shame it didn't work in practice.
Yeah, and you've got a 26-ton vehicle firing a 6-inch gun. It's not the greatest idea.
They should have just made it a lower velocity round. Did they think about that? Make it into something like a Stu.
Well, it is a low velocity round. The barrel on that thing's tiny.
Make it even lower velocity.
It's too big of a gun. It's a 6-inch cannon. It's almost the same as a 155. But yeah, I mean, going back to the asymmetric angle on that one, Joe, it's funny you mentioned the bats and the Americans, because it's not often that the dominant power innovates asymmetrically during a war.
Well, we did, however, as I was doing my reading before this episode, the United States in the 50s, inspired by the Japanese Fugo fire balloon during World War II, developed two separate balloon projects in the 50s. The Flying Cloud, which was supposed to drop nukes from a balloon.
The stealth nuke fighter.
Bomb. But then my favorite was the E-77, which was supposed to...
Before I preferably pop you, I assume when you say you did your research, you're referring to, again, that article I wrote last year that covers all of this.
Well, yeah, of course. You're going to talk about the cereal rust balloon that drops fungus on crops?
There was a few different attempts. So basically, it comes down to a balloon is basically a non-static balloon. So a balloon, because the first way people used balloons were like, oh goodness, this thing's going to float away. Somebody help me. Oh Lord. And so like they used very heavy ropes to hold them in place. And balloons only went on the offensive on accident, which happened a couple times during the Civil War. A civilian balloonist and his little battle buddy in the basket had a couple of confirmed kills because their balloon broke loose of a tether. But they were normally used for reconnaissance. And then they steadily start getting used for offense. And as you learn to control the air currents or motorize them with something like the Zeppelin, what you've effectively created is a really, really efficient but very slow airplane. And so you can use them to dust crops, you can use them to dust people, you can use them to hover in basically near space with the fabrics that we have now at almost no cost and just wait up there with a nuclear warhead to either...
Miyazaki, you can have them be pirates.
Yeah, now we're talking. Porco Rosso.
Or La Puccia, Castle in the Sky. That one as well.
That's a great one.
There's just a whole lot of options that you open up because you're now exploiting the air domain in a very, very semi-permanent way.
Cost efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't like cost-efficient stuff, so I would...
We really don't, you see? It's just not, not whiz-bang.
That's part of why some of these things get quashed, but unfortunately a lot of our balloon antics got quashed because of an unfortunate PR incident Are you
talking about the Joint Land Attack Cruise Missile Defense Elevated Netted Sensor System?
Yeah.
Or JLENS for short?
Yeah. So the JLENS thing is basically like an accidental demonstration of another application of balloons in World War II by the British. So one of the things that the British learned real quick, we've talked to Chinese strategies before, anti-access area denial, or A2AD. And the idea behind A2AD is you keep somebody away from you. They can't attack you. So it doesn't matter how cool their toys are. London was a really juicy target within striking distance of Germany. So to keep the bombers out of London, out of specific strategic targets in London, what Londoners did was they put massive balloons on chains and just hung them there. So the bombers could not get close enough to get a good bombing run in because they'd run into the balloons, run afoul. And so it was a very effective deterrent. And then what happened was, oops, it just takes one weakest link and goodbye, right? And so now you have balloons running amok through England, and somebody in the Admiralty goes, hey, there might be something here. And so this next time, they take a bunch of barrage balloons and launch them on purpose across the channel. They float across Germany, and cause like modern day millions of dollars in equivalency of damage to the electrical grid and other sort of strategic infrastructure for like the cost of like 80 pence, whatever the heck a pence is.
It's
Or
like 6 cents none the richer.
yeah, it's for an extremely low dollar value, they do some serious damage. I think in this really cool article you can find on the Modern War Institute, written by a guy named Joe McGiffin, it's quantified return on investment in terms of deep attacks. It did more damage than the bombing run for how much it cost.
It would actually be, especially nowadays with so many more power lines, especially high tension power lines, it would be unbelievably effective nowadays.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know if a man
The
get a track on one reliably because there's no
Well,
heat signature.
Could we compare this to the Chinese ship that ostensibly dragged its anchor just by mistake?
Across the undersea cable? Oops. Our bad. That's actually a really good comparison. Undersea cables are insane, and also pipelines.
history doesn't
are
repeat
insanely long.
itself,
But it rhymes a lot.
but it rhymes.
And we should use the ideas because they work.
We should drag anchors. Just start
Drag
dragging.
anchors, man. Just drag anchors. Have special designed anchor draggers.
Yeah, no, I don't know if the offensive barrage balloon tactic would work in this day and age, because think of how heavy that chain is. That balloon is going to be visible. And you already had the government of South Carolina begging its populace to not try to shoot at that Chinese spy balloon as it passed over. So, I think somebody would bring
In Russia, no one owns firearms in Russia.
Yeah, nobody else.
Highly
Exactly.
effective.
You'll actually be.
so
And
maybe
also,
we could use it.
the average reaction time of a Russian towards something happening is the yeah, but, and then they need to film it so they could post it on, Telegram. So you'll have at least about 20 or 30 minutes to do something before they can actually react.
We all know how quickly they reacted to Prigozhin's revolt.
Yeah, there's like, it is Tuesday. I will now stand in line for bread again.
And wait for vodka ration. Then
Yes. Yeah, like I said, actually, it would work much better on the Russian just because of their natural, whatever, slavish mentality, whatever you want to call it.
And in action.
Yeah, they have zero motivation for that.
Okay, so
Never have.
we talked to the fun exploration of balloons, which culminates in either nuclear warheads or nuclear warheads used to launch an electromagnetic pulse in the stratosphere, which is all fun and good.
Yes. Wait, all fun and good except for the fact that it knocks out all electronics on the surface underneath.
Yeah, so there's speculation on both sides of this, right? So most electronics are not even hardened by design, but should be hardened enough that it's probably going to be okay, right? Like you don't need that much insulation to protect wiring from an undirected, unfocused electromagnetic pulse like that. But that being said, there's still probably plenty enough exposed that you're going to have a bad time.
So also fry every single satellite on that side of the hemisphere.
Yeah, people argue back and forth about this all day, but it definitely poses a significant threat. And I completely forgot where I was trying to change tech here. Oh, so we talked about the Genghis Khan's or Roman tactic for dealing with an asymmetric opponent. But we didn't talk about other alternatives.
The night.
Awkward silence is not reassuring.
Well,
And it probably shouldn't be reassuring because
you Shahed drones. We use really expensive weapon systems to kill really inexpensive weapon systems. That's
And
the
hope that they
Right.
run out of money to buy those expensive ones before we do.
Well, let's bring it both further and closer to home, and let's talk Afghanistan. Is it still too soon?
No, we can
No.
talk Afghanistan. We're
But-
not
but-
so free where they banned us from talking about Afghanistan.
So the hearts and minds vibe was another approach to trying to deal with asymmetric warfare, was it not?
Did it work?
Unfortunately, we can't see the meh head tilting gestures don't really translate well in a
Yeah, but it did
audio
not
only
work.
podcast.
It did not work.
But does it work in theory?
The only time counterinsurgency has worked is Malaya, and it's a unique example in which you have an isolated peninsula, a very distinct ethnic group which you can differentiate from the rest of the population, and an inclination to segregate them and put them in camps. Short of doing that, not so much.
Who did this?
The
We're talking
British
about the British,
during the Malayan emergency.
Which was a
emergency. It wasn't a special military operation. It was an emergency.
For the rest of us mere mortals. When was this?
Oh, geez, Pete, what was it? Late 1950s?
I'm just double checking. Yeah, 48 to 60.
Okay. Took 12 years
That was a long time, but it was effective.
that they could control the ingress to, unlike Afghanistan, which is bordered by 7 countries. I forget. I should know what there.
Now, was there a Joe, as a Southerner in the podcast, was there a dedicated insurgency against the Union during Reconstruction, and how effective was it, if that? No, I'm just wondering. So, was that a successful insurgency or counterinsurgency? He's named for Nathan Bedford Forrest?
Yes.
I never knew that. I never watched the movie. I've never watched the movie. I'm not a boomer. Well, it's funny because my wife has a particular loathing for Tom Hanks because of that movie. Because while she was teaching school, I think that was the only movie they had for when she had to do substitute teaching classes. And so it was
That's a
all Forrest
fantastic
Gump.
movie.
Yeah, I don't.
Much worse.
I think after the 15th, 17th time, just didn't like it anymore, and never ever.
Lieutenant Dan.
I mean, you cover pretty much every cultural phenomenon from 1965 to 1993 in that movie.
I think that was the whole point. It's just
In the box.
nostalgia bait for people of that generation.
Lieutenant Dan bought stock in a fruit company. He did real well.
Mama always said life is like a box of chocolate.
Now, who was Galula?
It's
Mr.
so
Joe.
Frenchy.
No, he was not. He was, be specific. He was not just any Frenchie. He was.
No, I was like to say, I really thought he was French.
He was
but
a
now I
French
just like,
citizen born to Jewish parents, and I believe he was born in Algeria.
So he's like Lawrence of
He's a- yeah.
Arabia. Except
No, he's a-
his name is Galula.
He's a Pied Noir. He's a colonial-born Frenchman, and he has a very unique way of dealing with counterinsurgency, right? As he writes in his book, which is uncreatively titled "Counterinsurgency."
Whoa, easy there with the cool title there. I'm
We're
going
gonna
to
call it
on war.
"How to Eat Soup with a Knife."
No, so that was Lawrence Arabia's or no?
No, this was the.
Who wrote Eating Soup with a Knife?
It was not. It was another Brit, but it was not Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah.
Wasn't it one of the Malayan emergency dudes?
I think it was. Yes. Oh wait, it was John Nagel, but it was counterinsurgency lessons from Malaya.
What's the opposite? What's on the opposite side of the color spectrum from red?
Green.
Is it green? So you should have just named it the Big Green Books. Does the opposite to Mao's Little Red Book.
The Big Green Book? Well, that's actually
Yeah.
ironically the color of U.S. Army field manuals too. Yeah.
Ah,
Or wait, maybe that's next to it. I know red is complementary with blue, and it clashes with green.
we're past this already, Pete.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
well, yeah.
My mom is an art teacher, so she would expect me to
Yeah.
know these things.
Basically,
No, you failed her.
Galula's premise is still so there's actually 3 schools of thought, I guess, because one of them belongs to the Prussian that I won't name. But Galula's idea was that you basically create grids out of a city and you go square by square, making sure it's loyal to you and pushing anybody who's not loyal to you out. And you control access to the places that you have deemed safe. So going back to the British Malaya problem, incident, question, whatever they called it, sticky wicket, like controlling once you've secured a place, controlling access to it to make sure nobody sneaks in behind you to start shooting you from behind.
So the exact opposite of what we did in Vietnam and what the Israelis are doing in Palestine.
It's extremely problematic when you don't have discrete boundaries because, like Galula says, it just becomes extremely resource intensive, which is basically all a certain Prussian officer had to say about it as well. He's like, well, in theory, insurgencies are the absolute worst, and you basically have to put your entire military to work just looking for these people. So don't do it.
Yeah.
That's what he says. So that's option number 3.
That's the Clausewitz answer, right? Just don't do it. Don't be in that situation.
Don't do drugs, kids. Just
Don't do drugs.
Just
Or you
see,
will in hell.
see where this
you
is
die.
going. See where this is going, and opt out before the free trial ends. That's the third choice, and that's the most economical choice too.
What the U.S. would have done in Afghanistan: go in, kill Al Qaeda, the Taliban, play whack-a-mole with terrorists, and leave.
That's the one
Yeah.
traditionally chosen.
So I think, and I keep meaning to write these down as I go through and I edit these and listen to the episodes again. I'm like, oh, we said we should talk about this. We should definitely talk about this later. And then we get up to recording time, and I'm like, I don't remember what we should have talked about. And I don't
Never-
sound
never
my
get-
voice enough to go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah, but
We'll
we
figure
never
it.
get bored now, do we?
No.
Yeah.
It's always a good time.
But so I think how the military ends up being America's state building asset and why America gets into the state building business is an interesting niche of strategy that we should explore at some point.
Yeah.
What
I
did
mean,
what did other successful empires do for state building?
Well, they actually reached out to their brother Andrew to ask them if they want to come on the podcast to correct my revisionist approach to 18th century warfare.
Actually, that would be cool because I mean, what would you say? Arguably the best or the greatest empire in history is probably the British Empire when it comes to like stability relative, right, and long-lasting influence.
Theirs was really fascinating because theirs was also the first non-contiguous one too.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
not
but-
no Spanish Empire first. Yeah, Spain, dude. Spain reigned supreme from 1500 to 1640.
So the British Empire largely defines almost the entire Age of Sail.
yes, I agree with that. I mean, the British Navy is the best Navy in the world from the mid-18th century up till roughly World War II, in my opinion.
What point of World War II would you say the torch passes? 43?
Once the Essex swarm hits and we
Yeah, 43,
44.
Yeah.
feel like they're going out of style. I mean,
Mhm.
you forget the absurd number. We built 130 aircraft carriers in World War II, like 700 destroyers, 600 submarines, 100 cruisers, a couple dozen battleships,
Unspeakable numbers of merchant ships.
unspeakable numbers of merchant ships. And meanwhile, the British during World War II more or less focus on light fleet combatants. They built a few aircraft carriers, and they can't finish a single battleship during World War II.
Wow.
Yep.
So they literally just they fought that whole war with their pre-war navy.
More or less, yes. Now, small surface combatants, destroyers, cruisers, the like that.
Some hunters.
Sub-hunters, they're very good at building. But large surface combatants, they have one battleship they try to build throughout all of World War II, and they don't finish it until World War II is over, HMS Vanguard.
Yeah, so if the Germans were able to keep the U.S. out of the war, they might have actually been able to bring the U.K. to its knees if they had competently focused on submarines and asymmetric naval warfare instead of
If they had just
boondoggles.
acknowledged they were going to take losses, they probably would have conquered Britain.
What is this asymmetric naval warfare you're talking about?
Well, why the Junacol and its successors, right? Commerce rating.
The whole idea that you can compensate not having a large navy.
Pretend like I'm trying to learn about the basics of tactics and strategy, and I'm trying to figure out how asymmetric warfare could apply to submarines.
Well, the two main theories of naval doctrine are what? Decisive battle and
Mahanian theory.
Mahanian decisive battle, and then with the cruiser school, right? The Junacol. So if you do not have the dockyards or the material capacity to fight a one-on-one decisive battle against a superior surface fleet, you have to go asymmetric, and you need to use torpedo boats, which I think was the original counter, was torpedo boats,
Correct.
Which is
which
A
is
small, speedy ship that has ship-killing torpedoes aboard.
which then demands the construction of torpedo boat destroyers.
it's like a mosquito.
It's a mosquito. If you lose a few of them, you'll be fine because you might have a few dozen crew on one of these things, but theoretically, and it does happen throughout history, during World War I, there's an Italian motor torpedo boat, essentially of one of these things, that sinks an Austro-Hungarian battleship, the Sven Istefan.
Yep.
And they could do it because we don't have torpedo defense systems during World War I on ships. So everything turns into the Titanic if you get enough flooding on it.
So maybe even going past this whole asymmetric or not thing, speaking about torpedo boats and sort of linking these to where drone warfare is developing, as we've talked about in the last couple episodes.
You look at the unmanned surface combatants or surface vessels the Ukrainians have used against the Russians. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
quantity is having a quality all its own in this day and age. It's not about having the biggest, most armored thing anymore, because whatever you can manufacture cheap, you just literally just spam the surface of the sea, spam the air. Something's going to get through at some point.
Joseph Stalin was right about that.
Well, as Pete corrected me yesterday.
It was Lenin.
It was technically Lenin.
It wasn't technically, it literally was. But we had this fear too. Remember the Millennium?
Technically, he said it in Russian, so.
Remember the Millennium Challenge episode? That was 24 years ago, I think, at this point, which was the exact same fear that the Iranians or Red Team would do the exact same type of attack against the U.S. Navy in the Gulf.
We don't like this game. We don't like this game.
No good. You can't use those asymmetrical threats. We can't use our aircraft carrier.
War gaming. War gaming was another one.
Mm-hmm.
War gaming.
We'll do another episode of that. That's a great idea.
Could bring up Dimecraft there.
Talk about Krieg. Got to talk about Kriegspiel. Computers, honestly, I'm kind of with you on that, because the algorithm, I think, has a seductive quality of making you think you've considered everything.
And that's why I have no sponsors yet, because the algorithm is against me, because I keep saying computers ruin everything.
Yeah, but again, the computer only knows what you tell it. And so it has massive blind spots because it's not even aware of the existence of those blind spots.
We're getting. Do you want Skynet, Pete? Because this is how you get Skynet, right?
Oh, dude, see the Did you watch the advertisement for GPT 4.0? It's the voice. It's the text to voice new Chat GPT model, and it's straight out of Her, starring my guy Ryan Gosling. It's pretty interesting. You should take a look at it.
The two bros are tight. You and Ryan G.
Oh yeah. He's literally me, man. Watch all of his movies.
You live vicariously through him.
I do. Ever since Blade Runner and Drive.
Not
It's
the original Blade Runner was hard enough to get through.
Ooh, the new one is Blade Runner 2049 is unironically up there with one of the top movies of all time. Hey, the same guy who made it did Dune, so you'll love it. You like Dune, right, Joe?
Villeneuve can direct a film.
Villeneuve, he is absolutely amazing, top tier director.
I can sense Joe's not a cinephile like us.
No,
So Dune 2 wasn't bad. Dune 1 was just too slow. And Dune is a thick book.
if you actually
But it's not 3 movies thick. Yes, I have. That was one of the first Audible purchases.
One of my life dreams is if Villeneuve remade Starship Troopers, but was able to capture both the joy of the original movie.
I want Neil Patrick Harris to remake Starship Troopers.
You need to keep. If it would be absolute perfection if you could capture the parody aspects of the first movie, but just got a little bit deeper.
All right,
It was a little bit more
Pete,
books.
you should write this down. We should do brass. I don't even.
Brass tactics at the movies.
Rest text at the movies. Our favorite movies.
I was trying
You
to
don't.
find
You do
them.
not want me to talk for 40
You
minutes.
just come up with
Why?
a 5 list.
Yeah, you don't need to tell me.
Of each other and see what we agree on. We can have a top 5 and a worst 5 of a category of movie, whether it was war movie or something else.
Well, how do you quantify it? Like, are we talking movies? Are we talking short series, special series?
We can include miniseries, but we'd have to say Band of Brothers doesn't count because everyone's going to put Band of Brothers at their top 1 most likely. If we're talking about war movies,
Are we allowed to veto anything?
We all come up with our top 5 and our worst 5.
Yeah.
You
As
can
long as nobody has,
voting system, do it with points and see what we come up
as
with.
long as nobody has the Pacific in their top 5, I won't have to need any for that.
So disjointed and choppy.
Oh, it's terrible. They had no clue what they were doing.
The only way to make it even worse is to watch it immediately after finishing Brand of Brothers.
I did that when I was in Afghanistan, and I was
Terrible.
refused.
Yep.
Although the guy who plays, who's the one dude who plays Zero or Snafu, that guy was awesome.
Anyway, thanks for listening. So